viewers, and welcome to Pop Culture Cult. I'm Sean.
I'm Janice.
And welcome to our discussion, reaction, review, breakdown, wild speculation of who the armorer is of The Mandalorian, chapter 21. This is episode 5 of season 3. Blah, 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 blah. We're just gonna start calling it by the chapters because they're kind of setting it up like a comic book. It's that's how I've been seeing it, and so and this one is called The Pirate. Spoilers: the pirate showed up.
If you watched the previously on, you'd have figured that out.
Yeah, right. I want to discuss what happened last week to kind of set up this week a little bit.
Okay.
With the idea of saving the young. And the idea of they did it on the dinosaur planet with the Mandalorians and Bo and Din trying to help Paz save his son, Ragnar, and the armorer like kind of being like, you are following the way. You're cool. I think I like you. And then the whole Keller and Beck saving Grogu and that whole process and everything. That was a really good like reminder about what this show is about. It's really kind of about finding out what the Mandalorian, who the Mandalorians are, and how they feel and whatever, but also kind of the understanding of like Star Wars as a whole, kind of having that. It's about the next generation. It's about doing all this stuff to help the next generation and learning valuable lessons about what is good and what is wrong and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I really like that. Then you come to this week, and it's about shooty up stuff. Pew, 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 pew.
Right. So everybody complaining that there's not enough shooty up stuff. I mean, they didn't, not necessarily in The Mandalorian as much as in Andor, but
Right.
and
weird creatures and cool ships and like yeah.
And they tied it back to not the last episode, but the episode before.
Yeah.
With the woman who was on
Elia Kane.
Okay.
Who was the one who made Pershing into a vegetable.
Right. So I mean, if I was, what's the they're not called the Rebel, the New Order, the New Republic.
The New Republic.
What's the guy's name? The fighter who comes into the office.
Oh, Carson Tevin.
I would have been like, biatch.
Right.
Nobody invited you into this meeting.
Right. Right. I have thoughts. You can see you can. This is the A and B conversation. You see your ass out.
I mean, he was there trying to ingratiate himself, to get help.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that they are showing how the center of the New Republic has just like, they're not the Rebel Alliance anymore.
Yeah.
They're all about the city and politics, and they've just gotten too big for anybody to even half the time know what's going on, let alone have the...
You ever watched a movie and thought, like, this is just visually amazing, and I just love the way it looks, and the colors are amazing? Well, our friends over at Movie Palette have come up with these great pieces of art that you could put up on your wall to show your love of movies without really necessarily being overly dramatic about it. Think of a movie barcode kind of thing, where you can look at the colors and know what the movie is, but it's very, very subtle. If you know us, we are into Tron Legacy. The music and the lights and the color itself is just amazing. Just to give you an idea of what they have. Go to moviepalette.com. Find your own personal favorite movie, your movie color palette, and have it hang on your wall. At checkout, put in Pop Culture 15 to get 15% off. Thank you, Movie Palette, for sponsoring this video. Link is in the description down below. And don't forget, use Pop Culture 15 at checkout to get 15% off your order.
Resources to help when they do know what's going on, and
Right.
you need to be part of our group, or we're not going to necessarily maybe not help you, but not prioritize you, and all of this, which then leads into Andor, and we see kind of where that's all going, and they're just like, you won.
You won. Now what?
Now what?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're screwing it up.
And it's not screwing it up out of malice.
Right.
It's not
Right.
screwing it up out of a power play. You're screwing it up because you're having to reestablish a democracy across multiple systems and multiple religions and
Yeah.
multiple cultures and
Yeah.
multiple things. And to be honest, the Outer Rim is the Outer Rim because they're the Outer Rim. Like
Right.
they're the furthest away from everything. And so
Right.
it's really hard for Central Kansas to get excited about sending any help to Ukraine.
Right.
And that's
Right.
the exact conversation that's kind of been going on throughout this entire season. But then you have, to use a reference, the French. The French and the Mandalorians. Hey, we can help. We're closer. We've got the equipment. Here you go.
Yeah.
And so
It's kind of colonization, right? Like the
yeah, in a way, yeah,
European England, they're it- like like um the Bahamas are are being attacked and being taken over by the pirates and stuff, and they're like, I don't have time for that. And it's like, but they're in the Bahamas, and now they're in Florida, and
right,
now
right,
they're
right,
in, the US, which is this big country that
yeah.
can that so
Yeah, and that's I think that's kind of the underlying the reason I brought up last week and the idea that Star Wars is this tale, this discussion, this story of right and wrong for kids, but it's also for, you know, naturalistic versus
materialistic.
mechanical. Totally nailed it.
That's a
The
word.
mechanical versus the natural
Oh,
is
okay.
what I'm trying to say.
Okay.
But I started with natural, and then there was a word, and there was an M, and a at the end. But also the idea of American imperialism, and and I mean, George Lucas said it's about the original Star Wars is about the Viet Cong versus the U.S.
Right.
And so to have the story we had last week of the morality tale of fighting for the children and teaching them what is right and wrong and all this stuff, all that stuff. And then this week you get an example of the New Republic trying to not necessarily be the colonizers. Yes, they're being they're the absentee colonizers now at this point in time. And then you have this idea of, well, if we have to fend for ourselves, let's all these small groups band together
Yeah.
to defend ourselves from not necessarily the empire or the remnants of the empire, but people who would want to take advantage of this situation.
Right. Yeah.
And I love that. The reason I want to talk about it so much is because that's the reason we have Star Wars. It's just wrapped up in pew 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 and spaceships and weird creatures and cute little baby dolls and like all that stuff. And some people are complaining more this season than they have in the past that there's no direction in the story. And I have
Just woosah.
I,
Wait
and,
a minute. It'll get there.
and some people have come back and said, I don't know where the story is going, and I need to come to terms with that. They're not saying that as a critique,
Right.
whatever.
Right.
And there's some people, IGN specifically, who is Mandalorian is dead because they have no idea what they're doing. You're gonna sit here and tell me that Dave Filoni and John Favreau, who are deep into the Star Wars stuff, don't know what they're doing and are amazing storytellers.
That's clickbait.
But
Just
it is, but it is a on multiple sites talking about how this season has no direction. From my point of view, I'm not going to necessarily speak for you, but I'm pretty sure we're on the same page. I like that we don't know where we're going.
right. Well, and this uh, this is the the atmosphere that we have created. This is a situation that we, the royal we, podcasters, speculators, online
Reactors,
people, reactors,
yeah.
people taking every scene from a trailer and breaking it down and trying to find the Easter eggs and all that. This is the world we have created.
Right.
Because these creators like Star Wars and Marvel and Disney and and DC, and they they've all got to keep stepping it up and keep trying misdirection, like in the last Avengers. Um they they in the trailers they specifically took people
Mm-hmm.
out of
Mm-hmm.
the scene,
Mm-hmm.
and we're pretty sure, well, they did do it in the newest Guardians scene. For a while they had Gamora wasn't in it, and then she was.
The No Way Home had the one Peter in it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so they've had to try to trick us. Well, this is a TV show. There's not really a trailer for us to to.
There was a couple trailers.
Well,
but
yeah, but it's a little
it's a little
different, right? And so they can't. There's 8, 10, 12 episodes, whatever, and they can cherry pick and but um, to not have people guessing the direction in episode 2, so that everybody's like, but I know what's happening.
Yep.
I don't need to, this isn't
We're not
need to watch water cooler the next day, because everybody knows where we're going. Now it's like, well, what is going to happen this episode?
and
Where are we
people,
going?
you people, I'm going to point out those people who are complaining that this show doesn't have a direction, whatever. You people all complained after the first 3 episodes at Andor that I have no idea where the show's going. Why are we even going back and telling Andor's story? We know what happens to him on the beach on I want to say Jakku. I know that's not right. It's gonna come to me. Scarif. Processing. I need more RAM is what I need. But but it's like there's this thing that's going on about the gotcha headlines.
Yeah.
Look at what's happening with Jonathan Majors right now, and I that's a whole different podcast. But um, this show is doing all the same beats that Andor did. It's telling the same story that Ahsoka's gonna not the same story. It's gonna have all the same rhythms as Andor and Ahsoka and Bad Batch and Clone Wars and stuff like that. It's just packaged a little bit differently. Instead of Jedi, we have Mandalorians. Instead of the Empire, we have pirates. It's,
Right.
And so I loved this episode for the pew pew pew. Oh, by the way, the armorer's pulling her poo again.
Yeah.
And,
I loved this episode because of all the. I mean, I really enjoyed this episode because don't know what's going on the whole time. When it was over, I was like, what is going on? Because
when Paz gets the freaking I'm speaking hammer
Yeah.
on each other in the head and like steps up and's like, I've had problems with this guy, but he saved my son. We're going to Navarro.
Yeah.
I'm like, she's like, whose side are you on?
well, I was very confused when he took the hammer and started complaining,
Yeah.
and making it sound like he wasn't going to back this, because in the last episode, I thought that he had really, kind of advanced.
Yep.
And, you saved my son, and you and Bo specifically aren't bad people, and this is a good thing and all of this. And then he's like back to his old ways, and I was like, come on. And then he changed his ways, and then I'm like, okay, cool. And then the armorer were like, we have been, if you watched our previous episodes, we've been like, she is a bad guy, she is a cult leader. And like halfway through this, I'm like, we were completely wrong. And then the end, I'm like, or were we?
I don't. I have no idea. I still feel it's a play. I still feel it's a play. I I honestly think she's going to do something. She's going to convince Bo. She's already convinced Bo that you're going to be the one who brings us all back together because you saw the mythosaur and you're going to be able to ride it because you're
Yeah.
royalty and whatever.
Yeah.
And she knows where the dark saber is. It's on Den's hip over in the corner.
Right.
Whatever. I think it's all play to become the ultimate ruler on her own.
Well, and how did the Veskar get into?
I have another story. That's a different conversation. We'll
Okay.
get into that in a minute.
Okay.
But when it comes to the armor specifically, I still think there's a play. I think she's playing the Palpatine long game.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
Palpatine long game for a long time is I have this all set up. I can go to 1, 7, 3. If somebody does something, I can go to X. There's all these different things in play with Palpatine. So when Padme pulls her shenanigans, he's like, "Oh, good job! I have 7 other counter moves to that."
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it feels the more we watch with the Armorer, everything she's saying, at least as I sit right now, everything that she's saying makes complete sense.
Yeah.
But there's this underlying, and it might be Emily Swallow's delivery, which is completely on purpose, but it's very monotone,
Yeah.
very even keeled.
Yeah. But she has changed, and because when we saw her uh in Boba Fett,
Book of Boba Fett.
Book of Boba Fett, I was like, it's not called Boba Fett. The Fett, no.
Also the Fett.
The Boba.
Gee.
That, you know, her and Paz are like pretty much the only ones left, and she was being, pretty adamant about Den taking off his helmet now. And, you kind of feel like, okay, her motivation is to regrow her cult, her group, her coven, whatever, her cohort. But there were 2 of them, and then Din showed up. So now there's 3. You have, like tripled your numbers, and she's like, and she sends him away. She's like, nope, you took your helmet off. Go. She sends him, on this fool's errand that he actually accomplished. So, but now she's started this new group with children. So now I'm like, well, maybe she's sending Bo-Katan off to get others because it's gonna be a minute for these kids to grow up. Because they're like half of their numbers are kids and what appear to be teenagers. They're not tall, so so that's like half of their numbers, and then so by the time they get to be any kind of force, she'll be dead. So she's got to ramp up her numbers, but then what does she do? Like, does she allow them to walk this way adjacent to the way she's
That's
been
how
so
that's how it was presented this episode,
right, but she was so adamant for so long that was wrong, and so it's like, and maybe it's just because you can't see facial expressions, but
again,
you're like,
on purpose.
Yeah. But did she have a change of heart? When did that happen? How did that happen?
Yeah.
It was just like, she's this way, and now suddenly, now not suddenly, what, 5 years later,
Right. Whatever the time has been between the 2.
She's this other way, and you're like, what happened? And is that going to be some side mission show that we're going to get 4 episodes or 6 episodes?
I'm totally okay on the armor flashback scene coming up here where she makes the decision to become the armorer, lead a covert, start her cult, and then but also her, maybe for the betterment of my people, we shouldn't be so rigid and go forward and try to adapt to the modern times.
Yeah, because it seems like that was the downfall of Mandalorian.
And she even said that. And she said that. Bo has said it. So I think that there's some legitimacy to her actually coming to terms with the idea of what I really want is all of Mandalore back together.
Right.
And however I get that to happen, if that means I'm the right hand of the person that does it, that works for me. I'm the vice president. I'm one heartbeat away from being the president.
Right.
Like that conversation.
That she can whisper into her. She gains her trust.
She's already been motherly and parental, and even in this episode, she like, don't you respect my station?
Yeah.
And Bo was like, I do. Okay, I'll take the helmet off. Like that.
Yeah, but it felt like a trick.
It did feel like a trick. But it's definitely one of those conversations to be having. Like, okay, I'm only coming from it from I've seen other cult leaders do this kind of behavior in the past.
Yeah.
And so with that happening, I'm very much like I feel uneasy with what the armorer is, as much as I want to believe that she really wants to bring Mandalorians back together. I think she's doing it ultimately for her own good.
Yeah.
And I give the example of Palpatine because Palpatine did the same exact things.
Yeah.
He brought the galaxy strength and stability, safety and stability by making an army behind everybody's back. Like there's just like everything that Palpatine said echoes from the armorer's mouth, and it just I'm just like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, it's just and I'm sure that Dave Filoni understands that there's going to be some confusion that she went from being this rigid to all of a sudden, hey, we can all just get along. So there has to be
there'll be some. Dave and John know what they're doing. I don't question. I've said this in the past. I'll say it again. Book of Boba Fett's my favorite. I have no qualms about saying that and standing on the mountaintop. I understand if you didn't understand. I understand if you didn't like it. But I trusted what they were going to tell in that story, and it was above and beyond what I'm doing. What I thought. I have trusted them from the moment we got the freaking David poet painting of Mando and Sweet Baby Kevin in the first episode. And so I trust that they're going to tell that story at some point in time. John's already said season 4 is written. They're going to start soon.
Yeah.
And so, and there's 3 episodes left this season. Oh, by the way, the Ahsoka series is in this universe. Oh, by the way, Skeleton Crew is in this universe too. So they're going to tell this overall story over multiple platforms.
Right.
Which is what Star Wars does. And so, if you didn't watch Book of Boba Fett, you were maybe a little bit confused about what's going on with Din and Grogu and the Mandalorians and all that stuff.
Right.
And I get it. Like you're not obsessed like this with this thing like I am. And so I get that conversation. I trust that they will be able to come back and say, okay, the armor is X. And here's the diagram of why we got her to X.
Right.
And I think
it's the filling in. And I think maybe people are having a hard time with stuff because it's just how Star Wars is, right? Because they made the first one, which is now the 4th one, and the first, second, third, which are now the 4th, 5th, and 6th, and then they were huge, which George never. I mean, nobody associated with those original thought they were going to do what they did, and then there was such a clamoring for more, and George felt the effects had advanced enough for him to continue to tell the story. Well, now the story he's telling is the prequels, and then there was all this fanfic, for lack of a better, that was
all of the legend stuff
that was happening. That was then suddenly not canon, and so people were upset about that, and so they're going in and trying to fill in and fix and bring some of that legend stuff into canon, and So it makes sense that the new stuff is going to follow this weird kind of path to.
And Star Wars has always been here. I'll go up to the camera. Here's the story you got in the movie. Here's the rest of it. Force Center says it. I continue to steal it. It's tip of the iceberg storytelling.
Yeah.
And so this show is kind of filling the gap between 6 and 7.
Yeah.
And laying out like kind of where we get to with 7 and Snoke and Palpatine and that kind of conversation. And so it's some people don't like that storytelling, which is fine. I get that. I understand that.
Yeah. There's plenty of other
There's plenty of
stories
other
out there
things.
to.
But people keep coming back to this because we had a cool spaceship fight in atmosphere and
Yeah.
pew pew pews in the streets and
Yeah.
Mandalorians flying in jetpacks and
Yeah.
all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Let's we could spend hours talking about that. Let's talk about the Lambda shuttle that was Gideon getting freed and then finding the Beskar shard.
Yeah.
Now the Death Troopers from the end of last season that Luke cut his way through.
Yep.
Is an example of how Gideon was doing different things to make an army that he could control.
Right.
Also, if you remember the last two episodes of the first season, the only person that would have known Din's name was somebody who was attached to or had access to Mandalore.
Right.
And the Night of 1,000 Tears, the Purge, however you want to call it or whatever. And so Gideon himself, and he gave the client Beskar plates to pay whatever bounty hunter that brought him.
Did he give him those?
The client was working directly for
right,
Moff
but I
Gideon.
Didn't necessarily know how he got that.
And that's not
money.
That's not necessarily something that was just laid out in front of everybody.
Yeah,
but if in the dialogue, they said like the client's like, I need to take this call, and it's Moff Gideon who takes the call.
Yeah,
and Moff Gideon is asking him about the asset. Where's the asset?
Right.
You have the asset. The asset was Grogu, and so
right. But they don't specifically say that Gideon gave the client, here, use this as your payment. I assumed that he just, he was like, oh, okay, it's a Mandalorian, so I'm going to give him Beskar. But if it was a pirate, I would give him money or whatever the person was or the entity was.
And that's a very viable thought process.
Yeah,
and I'm not even saying that you're wrong, but I think there's
I just assumed it. But yeah, he could totally have given it to him
that
and said
he was on Mandalore. He led that attack to glassify essentially Mandalore.
Yeah,
it was him that did it. He has some vindictive thing against the Mandalorians, so of course he went back down and melted down the Beskar, and he's using it for whatever it is.
Yeah.
So I think the misdirect of that scene is the big thing is Gideon's got out. There was a rumor 2 episodes ago. We've got what
they talked about it again at the beginning of this one.
At the beginning, Kane's running around inside the New Republic, kind of directing the New Republic away from whatever Gideon is trying to do.
Yeah.
But I think that is set up specifically to make us, the audience, and people within the universe to question, does that mean he's working with the Mandalorians? And it's a very viable yes, that makes complete sense. But I don't necessarily think it's the Mandalorians. I think it's its own little group of Mandalorians working to do something, or it's something like the Death Troopers he built.
Or maybe he's got some actual, like you said, he's got something against Mandalorians, and this is all like you said about the armor. Maybe Gideon's got all these different angles that he's playing to get them potentially all in one place and destroy the rest of them. because they're all spread out all over the place
Yep.
right now. So by giving the client Beskar to pay, that kind of ensures that, or helps ensure that he's going to get a Mandalorian. He, came into the town and where the Mandalorians were hiding out in the sewers,
Yep.
which
Took out the whole covert
covert, which
cult.
they had made themselves, known
Yeah.
when they came to help Din. So they had, kind of just been hiding out. Then they
Yeah.
came all out of the sewers. So now he knows there's this whole group there. So he may be just trying to get them all together, flush them out, or
Flush them out. There's also, I'm thinking about the Luke scene when the Death Troopers are attacking.
yeah,
He is, even though he lost his fight to Din and lost
Yeah.
the Darksaber,
yeah,
he doesn't seem nervous until Luke shows up.
yeah,
And then once Luke shows up, his whole facial, Giancarlo Esposito is a natural treasure. But his facial expression changes when he realizes, oh crap, it's a Jedi.
yeah,
And I've been saying since Jump, when he got introduced, that he wants to be Vader. He's got the big cape, he's got the black outfit, he's got the chest piece. He wants to be Vader. And so I there there could be something in there about making his own Beskar armor. Blah 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 blah. That's a way deep fan theory, but the idea that he wants to be Vader makes a lot of sense to me. Just the way that he presents himself, but he was not nervous about what's going on because he has plans upon plans upon plans, like we were talking about with the Emperor, and like we're talking about the Armorer.
yeah.
Now, do those plans with the Armorer line up with Gideon?
Right.
That's a conversation a lot of people are having right now, and it's actually a viable conversation. Because how does the Armorer have all this Beskar to make for the Foundlings
Yeah.
on
All
the
of a
dinosaur
sudden.
planet?
Yeah. Yeah.
How does she have water from the living waters of Mandalore in the mines?
Yeah.
To build
To
a new,
add
to
that-
add to the new thing.
that-
Like, so there's
yeah.
enough questions there where
Yeah.
you're like, maybe there's something more going on, which is why we're so nervous of who the Armorer actually is.
Yeah.
And in somebody so strong as Din, who was raised in a cult, and then Bo, who was in a cult, who freed herself but is being sucked back in.
Yeah.
That's why we're having all these questions. Let's talk about some of the Easter eggs. Carson Teva is always win. That's it. That's a conversation. Him talking about there was somebody here that fought in the rebellion with me, and Red and Red R5 comes out. Red comes out where he's like, "Hi guys, sorry." We have to talk about Zeb. Aldafe. Fuck, I said it all day. Hi, John. Adolphi base, like an outer New Republic temporary base where the Y-Wings and the X-Wings are all hanging out, and the tents, and they're playing pool. Zeb showing up there in a flight suit for the New Republic. Okay, that character is a Zabak. I never expected to see that particular race in live action.
Yeah.
And it's CGI. I know it's not practical. There was no way they would ever be able to make it look practical and have it work just because of the way his legs are kind of shaped the wrong direction and all this stuff. But it looked amazing. And I find it interesting that they're kind of dropping all these Rebels kind of conversations in The Mandalorian. We know Ahsoka, the first season of Ahsoka, there's rumors of a second season, thank you, Ashley Eckstein, is Rebels 2.0, the search for Ezra, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, so they gotta kind of start to sprinkle in some of that stuff for people that don't watch Rebels.
And I think a lot of people are not fully understanding that all of this is one big story over multiple shows.
Yep.
And it could be, possibly, has been rumored, or at least discussed, building up to an Avengers level kind of meetup. So, but Zeb being there and looking amazing.
Yeah.
And Stephen Blum is actually voicing him. Steve Blum is actually voicing it. And I'm so happy to see this character because I love Zeb. Zeb is the big Wrecker from, if you're not watching Bad Batch, the big softie,
Yeah.
Chewie.
Yeah, Chewie. Yeah.
Like the I will rip your arms off, but I will hug you in the process.
Yeah.
Like, and Zeb's like Ezra's kind of, they're bunk mates and they hate each other because they're bunk mates, and then they come to love for each other and they go fight. So it was just awesome that they had that. The Lambda class shuttle that's been repurposed into a prisoner transport.
Yep. Yeah.
Because there's tons of them.
Right. Which they showed us a couple episodes ago, that there's just all this junk
everywhere. And they're trying to repurpose a lot of some Empire stuff, but not all Empire stuff. So
which makes it very confusing, because you see that and you're like, wait, that's a bad guy ship, right?
Right.
And oh wait, okay, it was repurposed. It had a bad guy in it.
Right. Right. Gorian Shard, who's the tentacle plant pirate, met his demise in this episode down with his ship.
I was happy that his ship didn't go down on the city. Because it was already trashed enough.
Yeah. But him, I thought he was going to be the bad guy in the Skeleton Crew. Oh. So now I have many questions about what that's going to be, and how they're telling that story. The Anzellans cheering on the fight. I'm just trying to think of some of the different little things that kind of kept popping up. But the big thing I think is just, what is the Armorer doing? Does she really believe in Bo as the possible bringer of everybody together, or is it a big play? And a couple people did say today that they didn't really like the idea of telling the story or having Gideon's escape be off screen. I get that. I understand that. I'd love to have seen it, but for the suspense of the show, it makes more sense to leave it with this dangling thread of
right. And I mean, they might show it. We don't know that they're. It could be the start of the next episode. But for now, we
need escape or whatever they'll call it. Or whatever.
Yeah, they need to leave it a mystery, so we're all like, who broke him out? Why is there Beskar in the ship? Yeah.
I'm loving what they're doing in the show overall, and if you're not watching the Bad Batch, I needed the palate cleanser that was this episode of just the fun, fighty up, pew pew pew, weird creatures, great sound design. I did want to say, a couple people are like, I'm not liking the stagecraft or the production of the way it looks this season.
Yeah,
it feels like it's down. And I think it looks better from my point of view.
Yeah.
I think it looks better because a lot of the stuff that's happened all over the show has all been out in the light.
Yeah.
It hasn't been dark in the sewers or on some planet somewhere,
nighttime
or whatever.
Dusk or
dawn. Some people complained about the Mines of Mandalore being too light or too dark. Fix the settings on your TV. Like, I get that. That was a Game of Thrones problem.
They are mines.
Right, exactly. But I love the way the production design looks this season. Multiple times this episode, I was like, that looks so cool.
Yeah,
that looks so cool.
Yeah,
the all the pirates, all the different faces and creatures, and
to be fair, we have a 4K TV, so
we do have a 4K TV. So there's a little bit of
there's a lot of like, wow, it looks like you could just, it's not 3D, but you could touch it.
Carson's X-wing coming in on the dinosaur planet. Mm-hmm. By the way, Lake Powell. Flying into Lake Powell. You're like, that's real.
Yeah.
It's not the glitchy. What do they call them in the
pixelated?
Not the lines. They were talking about the lines in the Imagineering when they were when they flew the X-wing, they had to go in and make sure that the line between the matte painting in the background or the background, whatever,
and the model
that they
were because it would be like blurry on the edges.
Yeah.
The cut lines.
Yeah, something
maybe?
like that. Yeah. So, but it was just, it's like,
Yeah.
that's
all
our real
gone.
X-Wing at Lake Powell.
Yeah.
And then he parks it next to the water. Okay, somebody needs to give Carson the freaking memo that there's dinosaurs in the lake that will eat your ship. And Yoda's not around and Grogu's not strong enough. And Luke's not coming to show up to get your freaking towing service, to get the freaking X-Wing out of the water. But I just, I'm really liking what the production design and how it looks and just telling in the story, and the questions I have every week is a good thing for me.
Yeah.
And
you're not like, oh, I know exactly what's going on.
I knew exactly everything that was going to happen to The Last of Us, and I still loved that show.
Yeah.
The execution of that show was nearly perfect for me.
Yeah.
But I knew everything was going on in that show, so the surprise every week of what was coming, I was like, okay, this is cool. I'm really glad. It's really awesome, but I know it's coming.
Yeah.
And this week, this show has been, okay, we've gotten Zeb, Kelleran Beck, R5, like, who else is going to show up in this show? Hashtag Hondo Watch. So let us know what you thought of this episode in our 40 minutes that we talked about this. We're going to be late for a dinner. Let us know what you thought of the episode in the comments down below. Please be nice. That's a requirement around here. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notifications, follow us on all social media stuff, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. Links in the description down below. And until next time, cult members, good afternoon, good evening, and good night now.